So call to order Longmont Housing and Human Services Advisory Board, Thursday, September 14th, 23. Are there any public invited to be heard?
Did you get any?
No, I did not get any response.
None, okay. We can review the minutes from the August 10th regular meeting. I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes when and if somebody's ready.
I motion.
Okay, Crystal motion.
Crystal,
Thank
I'll
you.
second.
second, all in favor? Raise your hand and say, oh, I got you.
I motion.
Aye.
All opposed? Any opposed? See any? I'm gonna abstain. So it wasn't there, and so it's can't. Motion passes. All right, housing and community investment, Village Place loan forgiveness request. Deb, is that you or Katie?
Yeah, that's me and Katie. I think there is a presentation that I don't know if we have to share or if you share.
We can share this. That should be on the bottom of you.
Okay, I'll just do a little quick intro and then
There
Katie
you go.
has most of the
On the right
information.
side.
This
That
one.
one.
Back-
Scroll down. There you go.
I think that's just the memo. I can share the presentation.
Yeah, I don't think I saw a PowerPoint in the packet.
Katie has a PowerPoint.
Yeah, I'll
Okay. So
pull it
stop
up.
sharing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fine.
If as long as she has the ability to. And I'm gonna mute.
I'll make you a co-host, Katie. Hopefully that'll.
Oh, yeah, that should help.
Can you see that?
Not yet.
Oh, not yet. Sorry.
Oh, there it is. We're seeing.
Now
There we go.
you can see the picture of Village Place.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I'm like with Zoom, I'm still get confused. You guys are familiar with Village Place and Village on Main. We kind of chatted with you all earlier this year with CDBG and Affordable Housing Fund dollars, but tonight we are talking about a previously awarded Affordable Housing Fund loan that was awarded to Village Place in
Back in, please. Here, wherever you'd like.
in 2006. Since 2006, and this is all included in the memo that was included, but since 2006, LHA has paid a total of just over $486,000 of the $600,000 that was initially loaned to the project. That loan was for its initial acquisition and upgrades to major systems to the project. And now, crazy that 2006 is 18 years later, but here we are 18 years later, and Village on Main, or Village Place as it's known now, is going through the renovation of, again, major systems, but more importantly, kind of a full upgrade of the building. So new windows, all new unit features, including cabinets, countertops, appliances, common areas, looking at upgrading the solar to offset further electrical bills and much more. So what we're looking at tonight is to ask for forgiveness for the remainder of the Affordable Housing Fund balance, which stands at $297,833. So I was just going to kind of talk you guys through the project and give you guys a little bit of an overview. And then if there's questions, we can kind of go through that. But I think the kind of premise of the conversation is the city has invested other new affordable housing fund dollars in CDBG into this. So kind of looking at having to pay back the remaining affordable housing fund balance would kind of offset that. And so if we were able to get it forgiven, we would pursue other funding sources, whether that be back to the city, to the state, or ultimately reducing our scope of renovation to the project. So just to kind of briefly go to reorient with the project. Again, I think you guys are familiar, but Village Place, as it's currently called, it will be renamed Village on Main, is a 72 unit affordable senior apartment building located on Main Street at 600, just at the 600 block. Units are restricted to 60% AMI and below. Over a third of the tenants living in the building are actually at 30% and below area median income. So that we have a very large portion of extremely low income seniors living in the building that rely on the extremely reduced rents. There are currently no project-based vouchers supporting those tenants. A couple of the tenants have tenant-based vouchers, but we will be adding project-based vouchers to increase the affordability for those extremely low income tenants that call Village Place home in order to continue to upgrade and pay for the renovations. It was built in the 90s and has been owned by Longmont Housing Authority since 2006, when that affordable housing fund loan was put on the property. The planned rehabilitation for this upcoming year is through the 4% low-income housing tax credit program. So we were awarded those tax credits. I think that's new since the last time we spoke. Our previous awards were contingent upon that award. So we have received those that award of tax credits and are working towards closing on our other sources. As I mentioned, the rehabilitation is pretty substantial. Kind of, we're not structurally impacting anything, but that's kind of everything else, as far as all new paint throughout, new flooring, new cabinets, countertops, upgrades to all of the common areas, major systems, and improving energy efficiency throughout the building. All of the ADA improvements that are needed, and improving kind of the parking lot related to ADA and other kind of accessibility and usability issues. So again, that's a very high level scope, but the scope is pretty intensive throughout the building. The timeline throughout 2023, we selected our architect and general contractor and have been working on design. In the spring of 2023, the project was awarded the $500,000 and split between Affordable Housing Fund and CDBG. In the summer, we were awarded the low-income housing tax credits, which is kind of the key component to make the project move forward, and had been working on all of our design work. We just yesterday, actually, it's been a long day. Yesterday, we submitted our permit to the city. And so with that, we expect to be able to close. We need our building permit in order to close and to have all of our sources kind of set up. So we anticipate to close on all that financing in late November, early December, and then we'd start construction in early January and be complete by, we're kind of projecting October range, so 10 months of construction. And the residents have been thoroughly engaged throughout the planning process. We've had lots of meetings with them and garnered feedback on from everything to the scope of work and accessibility items to showing carpet samples and getting their feedback on that. So the building will remain occupied throughout the renovation. So we're doing kind of a phased approach. So it's one building with a wing on each side and 3 floors. So we're doing a wing at a time. So residents will be temporarily relocated while we do that specific. It's 11 to 13 per wing. So those 11 to 13 residents will be temporarily relocated, and their housing will be paid for by the project. and they'll be out between 4 to 6 weeks approximately. And then they'll be moved back in, and all of those relocation expenses are a part of the project budget. So then just progress. I think I went through kind of a lot of this, but other things that I hadn't mentioned, our application to the Division of Housing is in review. We'll be going to the State Housing Board this month. All of our environmental work has been completed and come back clean as far as asbestos and radon. Again, we have a relocation consultant that we're working with to ensure that we're adequately meeting the needs of all the residents and their unique needs as it comes to moving them out of their apartment and their items, and then getting them back into their apartment. We secured our private activity bonds and project-based vouchers, and I mentioned we just submitted our permit to the city. So this is, again, a lot of information that you kind of heard previously. But again, what we're kind of here today is just the forgiveness of the outstanding balance, that if the project were to have to pay that back in the closing of our new project and our new construction financing, that would reduce our ability and reduce the leverage that of the dollars that have already been given to the project. So there's kind of quite a bit more on the memo on the terms, and I can dig into that if there's questions, or I don't know if those of you have read through it, but can answer any questions that anyone has.
And before anybody asks, we did update the numbers since the packet was sent out. So you may have different dollar amounts on the memo that you have in front of you, and that's because LHA made a payment, and so the amount owed is a little bit less now. So that might clear up one question if you've been following along.
But either way, it would be the outstanding balance.
Right.
Yeah,
is less. And I would say from the city's perspective in managing the Affordable Housing Fund, it doesn't, it makes sense from our perspective, because we have had the benefit of having those houses or those units be affordable in the city of Longmont for this period of time, and they will continue. And like Katie mentioned, there'll be a gap that likely we may need to cover anyway. So it feels like it is something that the Affordable Housing Fund can certainly handle. That's not an issue. So that's all I would add to what Katie shared tonight.
Any questions from the board? I'll jump in with a couple. So it sounds like you weren't counting on that repayment in your budgeting. Debbie just mentioned it can handle it.
sorry, what was the last part of your sentence?
I'm assuming you weren't counting on that repayment when you know, in terms of your annual budget, that it won't have a negative impact on your current forecasts of funding if you forgive this loan.
Deb, I think that's a question. You're asking
Oh,
about the Affordable Housing Fund budget.
It will not have a negative impact. No, I mean,
Okay.
that money's not coming, but that would just be a one-time, right? It's not. Yeah. So with the fee in lieu and all of that has begun rolling along, at this time, we are doing well.
Okay, got it. And how often are loans like this forgiven? What's sort of the precedence for this?
I believe we went through the same with Aspen Meadows, but that was before my time. But I believe we have. I mean, it certainly carrying forward for another tax credit time frame. It really does help ensure that those units stay as affordable for Longmont.
Yeah, and so Longmont Housing Authority owns the building, I assume, or holds the mortgage on the place?
It's yeah, so it's a
Yeah.
Longmont Housing Authority property. Sorry if I didn't make that clear.
Any other questions? Board? Caitlin?
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Crystal.
No, you might have answered this question already, but if this loan is not forgiven, like, how does that impact you folks on your end? Like, have you had those discussions? What does that look as far as like the amount of work that you guys were wanting to do versus not being able to do if it is not forgiven?
Yeah, so we're definitely in a situation currently where we're getting our final kind of construction level design or construction document pricing. So it's more definitive as we move forward. So I think in the terms of if this wasn't to be forgiven, we would have to make a decision of what kind of scope items we can or can't do. I think we've been really intentional about the work that is within our scope. And so that's why we hope that with this forgiveness, it allows us to keep everything within there. Like the inclusive of adding solar to the building to allow kind of reduction of our operating expenses, but also aligning with the city's sustainability goals and things like that. So ultimately, we just have to have a pricing conversation and really look at our scope and reduce items from our scope that we were planning, that we were hopeful to do. I will say with construction, with this next round of pricing, the pricing exercises are always a little bit of hold your breath, and hopefully they don't come in way higher. So I think if it were today with our last set of pricing, it would be okay. We have kind of a scope reduction in a similar amount. If our construction document pricing comes back, unfavorable and is quite a bit higher, then I think again that would further add to the conversation of like what can we not really afford to do. So the other piece I think that for this project that is kind of unique is, like I mentioned, a third of the building is under 30% of area median income, and the rent levels are quite low. They are not even close to CHAFA level rents for even the 30% units or the 60% units. That is a result of ensuring people can remain in these apartments and that no one's getting put, or this renovation isn't causing any undue kind of stress to households that already are here. So obviously with a building this old, there's a lot of work to be done. But how do you do that and not really raise the rents when the rents are already very low? You have to have conversations like this where looking at loan forgiveness and additional soft funds. So our intent with this renovation, while it is quite vast, would be that there are no kind of nominal rent increases beyond the traditional normal, annual increases that you would see on a traditional basis.
Okay, and then a follow-up question. So it doesn't sound like you got like the final numbers. I think you guys, it sounds like you're kind of hoping and praying those don't come out too different from what you guys anticipated. And yeah, you're right. Like materials and things can change drastically. Hopefully it changes in your favor, and it's much lower, and like you guys are okay. But with that being said, you're asking for this forgiveness right now. Do you know for sure that these numbers will at least come out to a certain amount where this forgiveness will be needed? Or I guess I'm curious, should this wait until you actually get the final numbers back so we know what we're looking at?
They won't go down.
No.
I can tell you that. They're not going to be more favorable than we hope. If anything, we're hopeful that they'll stay relatively the same. So the scenario in which our construction pricing is, a lot more favorable and things are cheaper is not a scenario in which is within the realm of likelihood. So I don't know if that kind of answers your question. Not,
Yeah.
we don't obviously expect it to get, much worse. That's kind of why we've done 3 sets of pricing so that we can kind of anticipate. And that's why you do multiple pricing exercises, so that you didn't do a pricing exercise 7 months ago and now you're doing it and you're like, whoa, what happened? We've done a couple exercises in the middle. But the hope is, again, that you don't deviate from the last one too much. There probably will be some increases there, but again, the scenario in which it would be less is unfortunately not existent.
And the relocation expenses, and Katie, I don't know if you have that figure in your head of what we're estimating right now, but every one of those households, we are responsible to financially. They still pay their rent for their unit, right? But they're out for 6 weeks and we have to pay that per night at a hotel or other, type of an accommodation, plus the storage of their belongings, plus the moving expenses, some of our folks that are senior have a difficult time packing their own boxes and those types of things. And so I don't know if you know what the budget number is for just the relocation portion.
Yeah.
Is expensive.
The relocation portion of our budget alone is $800,000 to be able to move everyone out and their belongings out and move their belongings back in, and transportation and things like that. So it is a
And the hotel,
sorry, and the hotel, which is a huge part of that.
Yeah.
So these occupied rehabs are challenging in that aspect and add quite a bit to the budget. But it's a scenario that exists as far as, like, obviously the unit and the building needs to be upgraded, and you can't really do that. There's people living here, so there's not a way around to upgrade the building. It's just a costly expense that the project has to absorb. So
I would
Awesome.
also, having done some relocation renovations before, where I was previously, it really is amazing to go and see. I mean, you can see the pictures, and if you've been in the building, you know kind of what it looks like. And it's really chaos and a nightmare while it's happening for everybody, for the staff and for the residents and all of that. And then when it's done, it's like walking into just this palace, right? Because these people's homes are new, and typically all of the frustrations melt away, and it's just this really shiny penny that they get to continue to live in. And some of these folks have lived there for an incredibly long period of time. It's their home. And so I would encourage this board to go and see it when it's done to because you folks have helped already, right, with approving of some awards and things like that for this project. And we've been in front of you to talk about it before. But so no matter what you decide tonight, I would recommend that you come and visit and see when it's done. I'm sure we'll have a grand opening or something like that for the renovation, but it's very, very cool to see.
Well, I think the other thing I'll just tag on to that is the key is preservation here. Again, obviously renovating an occupied building is very challenging. However, if you don't, while the building degrades over time, in order to preserve these kind of vital resources for these seniors for the next 30 years, we have to be able to get in there and to upgrade the systems and to upgrade the units so that in 30 years, these are still units that folks have quality, affordable housing. So it really is more of a preservation model than a lot of the kind of projects coming forward. Creation of new affordable housing is obviously very important, but ensuring the quality and preservation of existing affordable housing that people are continuing to live in runs a close I don't even want to say second.
It's more like not losing 70. Is it 72 or 75?
72.
Yeah, so it's the idea of not losing 72 as well, because if we can't renovate it and keep it affordable, which always boils down to money, 100%, then somebody else eventually will come in and renovate it and charge market rate. I mean, that's just how the money works. So yeah, it's I would agree. It's right there parallel with creation of new units because it's the idea of not losing 72.
Can I ask, what were the original terms of the loan? Like, is it a 20-year, 30-year?
Yeah.
20-year, 2% interest, with that accrued as of January 2007. And the annual payment started in 2012.
And to date, $486,000 has been paid back to the Affordable Housing Fund. Approximately. There's just some change on there.
Have you all already partnered with, like, there's some agencies that will, for 10 years, upgrade like the windows to be the two-pane efficiency, they'll upgrade the lighting completely for free. Have you guys already utilized that sort of resource?
I'm not sure. We're utilizing like energy rebates and things like that. I'm not sure without knowing kind of the specific program you're referring to. I don't know that I can speak to that. I know obviously the city has like their CDBG rehab program that you can, that's kind of on a individual homeowner basis that you can get upgrades like that. But I'm not familiar with the specific, but we are pursuing kind of the energy related rebates that are available.
And just to follow up on that, my understanding, and you know, those programs that replace windows and so forth are really programs that, like, for example, the city pays into for individual homeowners, but it wouldn't necessarily apply to something like the Longmont Housing Authority being able to essentially use that same program to get rebates because it's not intended for that purpose, right?
Yeah, I think the equivalent, the city doing that for projects like this is giving Affordable Housing Fund and giving CDBG
Right.
loans, I think, which is kind of this conversation. So I think that's the equivalent of, obviously individuals don't come to the board, but it's a program that they can apply through the city and go through that process. So I think it's kind of an equivalent conversation to scale.
I actually think there would be an argument to those programs just because there are individual tenants in the individual units, and I think it'd be easier to like get them to apply the same sort of upgrade. That's the whole design behind it.
But renters generally are not eligible for those types of programs because
Yeah.
they don't own the building.
Actually, renters are, but I think something to point out is a lot of the upgrades that they're wanting to do. There's not a lot of resources or contractors or companies that will go in and do these cosmetic upgrades like carpet, you know, like EOC doesn't cover carpet, or it's not like so I think of the big bulk of these expenses or like the parking lot, things like that. There's not a lot of resources in that arena. There are for like, replacement of windows, installing smart meters, and that is for both renters and homeowners. And so, so something to look into, but I'm pretty familiar with resources available, and I know like a lot of the costs that you folks are going to be incurring, there's probably not a lot of those resources to help cover cabinets and sinks and but I do have one question that I just thought of. So after you folks renovate, are you planning to adjust the rent for those units so that, I mean, because it doesn't sound like this is gonna be, it sounds like the rent is so low that you folks are really struggling to kind of maintain, you know, just kind of move forward and be strong in, I guess, that financial department. Are you folks planning to raise the rent on these tenants so that they can continue living there and have a great place to live? I mean, I know it's not ideal, but you know, with everything that's going on right now, everybody is kind of facing these rent increases, and if you do renovate, then that would allow you, I mean, because then it would be marked at a higher value? What are, have you guys had discussions around that? So that way, you know, some of this money can get put back in your kind of reserve?
So LHA is, I wouldn't say the building is struggling to maintain the building in any capacity. In order to upgrade and do a major renovation, that's where pursuing low-income housing tax credits and other financial sources comes into play. As I mentioned, most of these residents are extremely low income, so a large rent increase would essentially evict them. They would not be able to absorb a large rent increase. And so that's where sources being forgiven, the low-income housing tax credits and the other soft funding sources allow us to pay for the renovation in part, while keeping rents at affordable levels for existing tenants. Granted, you know, nominal annual increases would still be expected. And when we look to renovate as units turn over and we have new tenants, we can utilize more appropriate starting rent levels. But again, we are very cognizant and aware of not using this renovation as a tool to create units that people that have lived here for 15 years, all of a sudden it's a brand new unit, but your rent just went up by 15%. That's not, we are keeping everyone in their unit and keeping the rents affordable for those and honoring the kind of the rent levels that are in place. And as we move forward, as you mentioned, as the units will be upgraded, we will be able to start our new leases at a level that's closer to the CHAFA kind of standard rent levels.
I would imagine that like upgrades create a crazy amount of equity. Is that, where would that go? And like, how would that be applied?
So the upgrades will obviously create value, but as we're keeping the building. So much like if you improve your home, it increases its value, but as the long-term owner of the property, it's not kind of functional within the ability to pay for the rehabilitation, I would say. So again, it will allow us to attract new tenants and get closer to CHAFA rent levels. Obviously, we're still it's a rent restricted property, an income restricted property, but as far as the equity from the upgrades, it we're not intending, we won't sell the building with these new tax credits. There'll be a new 40-year income and rent restricted covenant going on the property. So we'll continue to operate the property as it stands today.
Caitlin?
Thanks for answering all these questions, Katie and Deb.
No, I'm like totally.
I think you just touched on perhaps what I was going to ask about, but I just want to clarify. So, and it's not in the memo, which I would love to, I wonder if it should be, is with this project going forward, is there a refinance that's essentially happening? And so this loan has to be paid off as a part of actually commencing these changes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's
not like, and I'm asking that because it's essentially like, as soon as essentially you get the loan, any loan to do this project and all the various funders, because the city has given funds, there's Colorado level funds, there's federal level funds that are all going in. It's essentially starting a new loan. And so any previous loans have to be paid off at that point. And
Correct.
So the reason for this is because there's not essentially an additional $250,000 to pay this loan off in order to proceed with these renovations.
Correct. Yes. And so maybe that would have been helpful to explain at the beginning, but yes, so with kind of, yes, as this kind of resyndication and refinance happens, that money would either need to be paid or it gets forgiven. And if it needs to be paid, it reduces our ability to use those other funds for XYZ relocation expenses, the scope of the renovation, things like that. So it's not a matter of we're just asking, we're continuing with our existing debt and asking for forgiveness in this loan that, you know, that now we don't have to pay our principal and interest on. It kind of is flowing into the new financial model of it will allow our dollars to go further on the new refinance kind of capital stack.
Just from like a mental model perspective, it's like getting essentially a construction loan on a house where you have to refinance, like at some point you can't essentially have your mortgage plus a construction loan as two separate entities. They all have to be combined into a single, like essentially lien holder.
All the old loans are getting, like all of the 2006, and that's kind of how that's a function of these resyndications with new tax credits. When you get new tax credits, it's a full new financial deal. So all of the old tools that were utilized have to be somehow checked off in some capacity. And so if all of those have to get paid, then that further reduces kind of that starts the new project off with less because you're having to pay off all of those debts versus since we're continuing this as an affordable housing property and the intent of the money is for affordable housing properties. That's kind of where we're coming to this committee to say we're continuing the mission, we're continuing the intent of the initial funds in renovating an affordable housing project. So the intent of the original money still stands with the refinance and resyndication of kind of going forward.
Okay, and then one final question, just for context, is the forgiveness amount is in the between 200,000 and 300,000. What is, and you mentioned 800,000 as the budget for relocation. What is the total budget for the renovation? I just want to like for me, it helps to contextualize, like we're asking for forgiveness of, you're asking for forgiveness of this amount, but the overall project has a, this amount. And mostly because I think that this amount is relatively small compared to the impact of the project.
It is. So the project in total, the total development budget is, I'd have to pull up the number, but is around $20 million. So it is it's a relatively small amount in the grand scheme of things. So inclusive in that is design, it's all of the hard costs, it's the relocation expenses, it's permit fees, it's kind of any money that we're talking about here today that we do have to pay off and things like that. So yes, it is a smaller portion of the grand total. So that's where kind of the comment on we're utilizing kind of all of the resources and leveraging as many resources as we can for this project. So like I said, this is an independent conversation, but between the low-income housing tax credit program, the Division of Housing, we're looking at solar credits from the state. So we are trying to leverage as many dollars as we can and not relying kind of solely on the city's resources. So we're trying to definitely be aware of that and have a lot of other funding sources as well.
Great, thank you.
And these are all great questions. Thank you. We will add some of this to we talk this language all day long, so we forget that there are just pieces and parts to this that aren't that we take for granted. So thank you. These are excellent questions for us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Deb. Deanna?
So I was just going to add in that this seems like a really nice way to use some of the funds that are coming in from the fee in lieu. Just practically speaking, the fee in lieu means that affordable houses aren't necessarily being built. There's just money going into this bank account, right? So if we could use those funds to preserve senior housing for super low income seniors on fixed incomes, it just seems like a great way to use that fee in lieu fund. So if we're ready, I would like to make a motion to approve the Village Place loan forgiveness request.
I would actually like to talk a little bit offline here, just talk further with the board before we approve. Is that
So
what?
our meetings are open to the public, so they can stay either way.
Oh.
But
Well,
also,
I can
think
make
the
it less
motion, we
awkward.
have to actually determine the motion first.
I
Okay,
think we
so
need
do
a second and then we can discuss.
I second.
We got a second now, discussion? Crystal,
Yeah,
you
and
have
like
a
I said, I can
question?
make it less awkward and jump off. I have no problem with that.
Yeah,
So-
no, that's okay. I before we've had conversations, like people have left and then we've had conversations, so I didn't know what the setup was for this, but I'm happy to open this up a little bit. So I'll be transparent, you know. A lot of you folks knew kind of my stance on even when we first had the discussion in providing funding for the renovation. I think we had discussed, and it was like another fund, right, that we approved earlier in one of my first meetings. And so I guess my thing is you know, my concern is I see the need in the community for housing, and and although I feel very strongly that you know, we do need to preserve upgrades and you know, good quality units for, you know, the participants that are already living in these housing units. My thing is you know, if we forgive the 200, what is it, 250 to $300,000, that's money that's not going back into the pot for additional housing. um, and if it's true that this loan has to be paid off before they can move forward with the larger loan, then that just means that this money would come in sooner, which could be put to work sooner for more housing in the community. So that's just kind of something I'm thinking about. I'm not opposed to either, you know, but you know, it is a lot of renovations that are not necessarily connected to like plumbing and clean water and, you know, kind of those basic needs. And so I don't know what you folks, if you have a response to that, or um so just something for you folks to think about. And I guess if I were to sum it up, it's just like, you know, if we do this, we're taking money out of additional resources for folks in our community. And if we don't, that money will come back sooner versus years down the line, and we can put that money to work now. So I guess that's what I have to say.
Thanks, Crystal. Caitlin?
So I think that the idea that this money isn't gonna be used for our community is just, it's wrong, right? Like, these people are part of our community and
I
are
get it.
getting
That's not what
something.
I said.
I just like, I'd like to say, like, putting money into affordable housing projects is not something that happens quickly. So regardless of whether it's forgiven or it's paid back, I don't think it really changes the timeline of other resources in the community. There's very little senior specific housing in our community, and it's one of the biggest areas of need for our community is for seniors to be able to age in place, particularly those at very low income. This in particular is one of the, I think, one of the largest options for seniors, if not one of the only ones that LHA owns. And so I mentioned that because I just like, I think that the idea that like there's a nebulous future thing that this could be used for when there's something right in front of us with people who, you know, in a building that needs this, you know, I think in the grand scheme of things, in terms of the funding that we have coming in and what's available, this is like a very appropriate use of the types of funds and what these loans are used for. So.
Yeah, and I don't think it's gonna be like the make or break. Like, you know, if we don't approve this today, it sounds like these renovations will still go on. These tenants will still get upgrades, and you know, the show keeps rolling. 250,000 to 300,000 is a lot of money. So, but yeah, so I just wanted to put that out there. But I hear definitely what you're saying, Caitlin. And you know, it's hard to weigh these kind of situations, right? Because I see the pros and the cons on both ends. So that's my take. And if you folks are ready to vote, or if anybody has any other views that they would like to throw out on the table for others to consider, I'm up for other takes as well.
Yeah, Shakina.
Yeah, I just want to mention that, I know I can't vote, but I will say that Village Place is, us council, we know that there have been issues, and it's not just renovations, it's also security for our seniors. And we also know that our senior population is, I mean, they're living longer, right? And so we are definitely trying to secure a a safer place for them. That place is right there on Main Street. And so there have been a lot of issues with safety for them. And so we need to put in measures for our seniors at that location. I get what you're saying, Crystal, the 250 or whatever to 300,000. We, the city, are always applying for grants for situations like that. And that is a lot of money. I agree with you. We are moving forward with affordable housing no matter what. But this is a property that needs this renovation. And also for safety purposes at that particular location. So that I can tell you all as a city council. And but I do, you know, respect what you're saying about the funding, moving forward with affordable housing. We're moving forward with affordable housing no matter what, with the $200,000 or $300,000. I don't think that would take away from any other affordable housing projects at all. We are always constantly applying for funding and grants, through federal grants, state grants, that are out there, always. So wherever there's some disparities or deficiencies, we are always looking for extra funding for that. So I know for a fact with our current council, we are strong with affordable housing. So we get a lot of pushback on it, but we are moving forward with it. And that's why you see properties coming up everywhere. And in 5 to 10 years from now, people won't even remember all of this, you know? So, but I do respect your opinions and I do respect what you're saying. But affordable housing is still moving forward. And we will be still constantly applying for grants for those disparities within those affordable properties.
Okay, we'll go with Deanna, Martha, Caitlin, and then let's vote in the interest of time.
So I was just going to add in my own personal experience, and I'll keep it short, that I recently had to help my elderly aunt find a new place to live. And we looked at a lot of very affordable places for her because she's on a very fixed income. And I will tell you that going into some of the places was insanely depressing. And I thought, if I have to live in this kind of place as a senior, I'm going to be real sad. So there's also, I think, some value to balancing the need for increasing the housing supply with making sure that the housing that we're putting our seniors in is livable and isn't so depressing that they don't want to live, right? So I'm just throwing that in there. But I do appreciate the discussion about prioritizing what we do with those funds and whether we build new housing with them or rehabilitate old housing. But yeah, I think it would be nice to be able to give them a place that they like going home to.
Oh, those last two comments kind of answered what I was looking for, but I think the memo alone and like what was told to us didn't convey the negative impact for the current tenants in the way that would have motivated me to lean that way more. So safety is a huge aspect, especially when people are like breaking their hips and whatnot. So I would be curious about like just different like rails and stuff and like what safety measures are gonna go in. And then just because I'm paranoid about gentrification, is there a way to like actually have it in writing that they won't raise the rent beyond the Chapa allotment, or go in writing about not belling to anyone outside the city? Like I know we can't limit completely, but I would hope to see something in writing.
So my understanding is that the federal money is about a 40-year commitment, right?
I'm shaking her head.
It's a
Yes,
deed restriction, right?
Well, and also for I think what you're asking for is for the current tenants, because the Chaffa max rent is higher than what these folks are paying. That's true. And then for the current tenants, with some of these grants that we get, they look very closely at that, right? So we have to report what everybody's paying per household before, during, and after, because that's incredibly important with not displacing people. So yes, absolutely, it absolutely is a part of the process that is made sure. And then what happens too is that the current Longmont Housing Authority inherited it with not great business practices as far as increasing rents in a marginal way per year that makes sense for tenants' incomes plus, which almost all are fixed. That's likely true. And that doesn't really go up very much. So you do have to kind of, you have to be kind of sensitive and come up with a way that it's, is it like 1.5%, 3%, whatever, something that makes sense for the people to keep them there. But then as new people move in, they're moved in at Chaffa max most likely. So all great questions.
Caitlin, and then we'll vote.
I had what I think is maybe, I don't know if it's a point of order or something, and I'm not sure who would know the answer to this. My understanding is that what we're voting on here is what we're essentially recommending to City Council, but that ultimately City Council is going to be the ones that approve or not. For
Yeah,
this.
this is just an advisory board. At the end of the day, it's an advisory board and you advise.
Mhm.
And and council can choose to take your advice or choose not to take your advice and go their own way.
Yes.
Okay. I think that was it. So I'd like to call the vote.
Cool, could we reread the motion? Do you have that anywhere, or? Yeah, do you recall it? I think it's just to approve the resolution, right?
Yeah, I mean, my motion was to approve the request for the Village Place loan forgiveness.
Perfect. All in favor, raise your hand, please. All opposed, raise your hand, please. Any abstaining? I think that's everybody. So the motion passed. Thank you all. I think it's wonderful to have lots of questions and lots of different perspectives and points of view, and I think it's a sign of a really healthy committee. So thank you all for engaging and not being afraid. I think it makes for a healthy board. So
thank you very much. We appreciate all you guys do. Appreciate you.
thank you, Deb and Katie, and good luck with the project. Let us know when it finishes.
Yes, we'd love to have you.
Alrighty, site visit report in between.
So I guess this is you and me, right? And
Because
Kim was there as well, I think. So we did a site visit with the in-between. They're growing, so they got a new project that they are building at the heart of Longmont. 11 units that they're gonna put on that site. They are parent supportive housing units that they will have, which is great. The heart of Longmont, which is church on 11th and Kimbark, donated the land, which is awesome.
Oh, wow.
So that's a great project. From my desk on it, this agency is, you know, I've known Tim Rockow for a while. It's a well-run agency. They have very interesting, I really appreciated how they do the strategic planning process. I thought that was a great conversation. Got a little, it just feels like they do a really good job of connecting their operations to their strategies. But overall, I just felt that they are doing as good a job as they can, given, I mean, there are some challenges. Just because one of the challenges is helping people find, so they do have permanent supportive housing, but a greater portion of their housing is meant to be transitional. And there's just a huge challenge to get folks from the place that they can get out of transitional into their own, you know, market rate rents if they can't get, you know, an LHA voucher or something just because of the cost. So, you know, the people are staying longer than they have in the past, and they reevaluate those cases, you know, as their time gets nearer. They're working on giving them, you know, giving them all the stuff that they do. And so overall, I think it's a great program to have. It's a great resource to have in the community. So I just I'm grateful to all that you guys do. So that's my report. Grant and Kim, you guys talked a lot more than I did at that meeting.
Yeah, Kim, you want to go?
Sure, I'll go. Just some of the highlights I think that I took away from the meeting was they're really looking for increased funding to address mental health and wanting to grow their staff as well as the education and training of their staff to help develop programming to address substance use, offer counseling for participants in the programs. And so I think they're just really in touch with the needs of the community and seeing the demographic shifts as well in the community and being sensitive to that. And so I think that was the biggest takeaway that I have. Also, they do a post survey, which has shown quite a bit of success 2 years post participation in the transitional housing. 85% of the respondents report that they've been able to maintain housing and have been able to successfully use what they've learned in the program to maintain that housing status. So those were the things that I thought were just really notable when we met with the staff.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. They do not require any specific legal status to offer their assistance. In terms of citizenship, etc. They have discontinued working with minors, it sounds like, because that got a little complicated for various reasons. Their most challenging population, they said, is chronic homelessness or assisted living needs, and being able to sort of help folks who are struggling with housing but have all these other needs that maybe they're not as capable of. And I think part of their mental health initiatives are going to help shore up some of those other needs that often correspond with homeless issues. So let's see what else did they say.
Now they can go to the village on it.
I'm sure they have people on the waiting list for there. There's always waiting lists for these wonderful housing opportunities.
It's a 2 to 3 year program duration, which was quite a bit longer than I thought, and maybe that's part of what contributes.
Well, usually only 2. I mean,
only 2 years.
yeah, this is part of that challenge that, you know, people just it just takes longer to get them
Transition.
stabilized to be able to transition out.
Yeah. And it sounds, you know, they asked the city for about $75,000 a year, give or take, and it sounds like most of that goes to fund basically career advancement.
It was, yeah, it
skills
was
training.
Yeah, it goes a lot to their life skills training, to pay the staff to deliver all sorts of you know, training, case management. It really goes to those programmers in the resource navigation. That's what our funding goes to. We don't pay people's rent with it. We just help them. We use that money to pay the staff to get people ready for leaving to be successful once they get out of the transitional housing.
And they offer something like 60 different life skill classes. It's a pretty
And have one-on-one meetings. and-
one-on-one meetings, case management, it's pretty
Yeah.
broad array.
Yeah.
They really try to dig in, it sounds like, so. It's great. And they just hired a new director.
Director of operations.
Operations.
Yeah, their ED is still the same person. But that person has a mental health background and they're pretty excited about. The one of the things, and we're gonna talk a little about this in the next piece. And I think Christina's gonna lead that, but one of the things that, as you can imagine, working with this people who are struggling is burnout of staff. And so this new person has that mental health background to kind of not only support the residents, but support those program staff that's supporting residents to help them avoid burnout and deal with that secondary trauma. So yeah, I think they're in a good. I think they're on a good track. I just think that the challenges that they face are very similar to the challenges that we face as far as the city, not necessarily as a board, but as a city of having those affordable housing units to move, so people can successfully move out of transitional housing and into a more permanent situation. That's just a challenge that they have.
Yeah, and also providing resources because of that, right?
Right.
The people are not able to just get out and go get into another house. So now we're looking at least with the housing authority, we are looking at providing additional resources for those people so that they can be successful, you know?
Right.
So, and that's what we're finding across the board.
Yeah. So yeah, I think the in-between is no different than
Right.
what the LHA is facing. They're both housing providers and they're both struggling to ensure that their residents are successful.
Right.
So that's our in-between report. Now, is there any questions or thoughts?
I love the name, In Between.
Yeah.
Right. It's beautiful.
And Crystal, just so you know, somebody from EFPA is on their board. Ceci is on their board.
Yeah, so Celia Alba. I know,
she's
yeah.
awesome.
I work right next to her every day.
Yeah. She's on their board and they're really excited to have her. She has a lot of great perspective.
Yeah, she used to be a participant of the in-between, so it's really powerful that she has made it full circle and is able to give back to her community and help others in that way.
I think we're gonna turn it over to Christina.
All right, for nonprofit engagement.
Great, thank you. So we have completed all but 2 of our nonprofit engagement sessions. And we, I see, Grant, that you have our PowerPoint there. Brenda, which one was sent out in the packet? I'm
You know,
not seeing that. Did you send anything out?
out?
I'm not seeing that I got an agenda either on Friday.
You know what, I attached it to the invite.
Yeah,
But
it doesn't look
for
like
some
it
reason it doesn't-
attached. Yeah, it doesn't look like it attached. Well, I can, I'll just give a high level overview of kind of what we have seen, or what we've heard, from our nonprofit. So we have, two that are left. We have, one now coming up in, here in a couple weeks, and we are going to meet with the St. Vrain Community Council. We have heard that definitely staffing is an issue. There's issues that we have heard from our nonprofits about definitely leveraging some trainings around mental health, around just the secondary trauma that that their employees deal with, kind of face when their clients come to work with them. And so we're going to be looking at how the city can support our nonprofits just with different kinds of resources, whether it's training or other kinds of supports. What the intent is once we're all done with the feedback is to have a report out of everything that we've heard and really look at some of the changes that we might be able to make and some of the support that we can give. One of the things that has really become clear to me is that I think that there's an opportunity, kind of speaking to what we talked about in our board meeting last month, is the opportunity for nonprofits to work together to leverage their leverage themselves to work together, whether it's you know, at the program level, at the resource level. I think that there are more connections that can be made. So what I'm hoping will happen is once they see some of the areas that they're struggling in and some of those commonalities, it will spark discussion for more of that collaboration. And I think that on our side, in terms of funding, what we might see is, you know, maybe some more collaborative asks is what I would hope that would result in. And I think that you know, that in a time where resources are scarce, that is a way that we can move into. You know, I think they've really enjoyed, the people that have come to the meetings have really enjoyed, number one, being face to face with each other. I think that individuals haven't had a chance to engage in that kind of setting for a while. And so what we've talked about is the opportunity, you know, maybe even once a year to have some sort of nonprofit breakfast, nonprofit, you know, get together where we might talk about a certain topic once a year and just kind of kick that off. Is there anything else that either from board members that have attended or Filiberto and Brenda that I'm missing that you think would be important to highlight?
When I attended the childcare one, I really enjoyed speaking with all the different EDs and kind of learning their perspectives. And they have a plethora of ideas of, because they know their organizations in and out and like what would be useful for them, you know, what the challenges are that they face. And I really, and I don't know how doable this is, right? I'm a dreamer, but that's okay because hey, like you start to push and you start to push and you actually can create a movement. And so they were talking about like our funding and you know how they wished it would be a little more consistent, but it's hard, right? Because funding changes and you got to vote on it and there's tons of competition. But they were saying a few things about like receiving support from the city in ways like through utilities, right? And internet. And that these are like consistent costs that they have to pay full price for, right? But if the city were to alleviate things like that on that end, you know, they could afford to keep their staff and afford to do more in the community. And so I just wanted to bring that up to the board. And Shakira, I'm happy that you joined us tonight because you're city council. That's like a big deal. And so, you know, and this allows them to pay their staff and a livable wage and allows them to do more. So I just wanted to put that plug in there because I never thought of that before, but it makes so much sense, you know. They're not for profit, they're helping our community. And we had talked about it. At the end of the day, if these nonprofits can't sustain and keep up, then the work that they're doing ends up back on the city's lap. So why not support them now? So that's it. I'm gonna get off my soapbox.
That's a really good point, Crystal, you know, they looked at, they talked about what are the things that are affecting our bottom line where we could look to the city to you know, maybe help us out with, or B, look at how we could leverage our partnerships. So an example was, you know, is there you know, could we ask for a special nonprofit next light rate? Was one of the examples. The other thing was with our IT services. All of our nonprofits utilize them, and so if we came together, if we nonprofits, as they were talking, if nonprofits came together and bid for IT services with one company, could they bring down the cost for an individual website, for example? And so they were kind of thinking in those terms. So it really sparked some good conversation. And so I think when, you know, we have that report out, there'll be lots of good ideas to follow up on.
Yeah, I would, sorry.
Go ahead.
Definitely interested in learning more about that, because I think that City Council would be interested as well to hear about their ideas and see how we can help. And it makes so much sense, right? If we can reduce the, you know, next light rate, things that we have some control over, I think will be ideal, and see where we can, you know, pinch a little here, pinch a little there. And I think any little bit would help, right? And so, but the key is coming together though. I'm not sure about one nonprofit and, you know, asking for, you know, some assistance compared to a whole entire cohort, or, you know, coming together saying, let's, you know, these are our needs. How can the city assist us and help us, right? And so I think that they have a greater opportunity of getting assistance if they all come together with the same issues and same ideas. I think that City Council 100% will definitely listen and see how we can help.
Right.
So that's great. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah. And if you have one nonprofit, for example, like an early childhood organization that has one site, is one organization, but has several sites in the city. And then you have, you know, a couple of organizations that have that set up, you know, you just exponentially could save money on things like utilities or Nextlight or trash or whatever that looks like. I think could help them impact their bottom line and ultimately, you know, be able to pay their employees more. So
when would that report be out?
We have 2 more to do.
Oh, okay.
We have 2 more to do, and Eliberto, Brenda, and I are looking at the feedback that we've gotten so far and what that format will look like. So I'm thinking probably end of October, November sometime, just to give us enough time to look at it and make sure we've included everything and kind of get it out to everybody.
Just FYI, I know you all know this, but there will be a new council at the end of the year, so the sooner the better.
Yes.
Because we can't determine what the new council would, their perspectives and what they think and what they agree with. So I'm just saying the sooner the better. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Good point.
Yeah, and Christina, I was wondering, because like Shakita said, like the council would love to hear this feedback from the nonprofits, and that was kind of like our attention, right? In creating these focus groups, like what can the city do for you? Where could we improve? What are we doing good? Where can we work on? And so are you gonna write that report and then give that feedback to council? So council, because I guess just, you know, I guess I work like where I work and everything I do and trying to push change, you know, it's like all these great ideas come up and then and like everybody's excited and then it goes somewhere and we report back on it and then it falls off the map, right? And so
Yep.
I guess, you know, what I think after this is reported back to council, like what's the next steps? You know, I know Shakita says like there's power in numbers. And that's kind of what I talked about in that meeting. Like I was like, hey, all you guys, like they're not gonna hear just one person, but if all you guys come together and say this is what you need, like I'm sure that you could make a change, you know? So could we help them collaborate in that way or give them that feedback? Just kind of like we've done with organizations where we're like, hey, this is what you can apply for. This is what you can do. Because if they don't know that they can do it or we're even open to that idea, then who
Yeah.
knows if they're gonna, right?
Yeah. What I can do is put it on a council agenda as an info item and let our nonprofits know, you know, what you know, when that will go, what meeting. And to council member Yarbrough's point, shoot for doing that before November. Yep.
If I may, I think, thank you, Christine. I think, in large part, this board is positioned to be a conduit in the way you're describing, Crystal. And so I don't know, I think if there's a board member interested, I think that it would be within our, you know, roles and responsibility to submit a memo or recommendation to city council saying this is what we've heard from the nonprofits, please consider you know, reducing next light fees, and you know, we could dig in and do a little research. What exactly are the departments built? You know, building permits. You know, kind of hurt to hear those. These folks doing the $20 million project have to apply for a permit fee with the city. It's like, well, don't you know somebody over in the building department who could deal on the permit? I don't know, but yeah. So I'm just throwing it out there that we could do that, and you know. We could submit a letter to the board.
Yeah, the board could, and the board has at times sent, like for when we did the asking for the 3%.
Yep.
You were there, Graham. We sent. You were on the board. You know, the board can send a recommend. Again, they're all recommendations.
I'm hearing them volunteer you still.
And you know, I think it's easy with to kind of the next light point. I think it's easy. It's just as easy as, you know, along with sending this information to council, to have, you know, for me to have a conversation with Valerie Dodd prior to it even going to council. She is very community minded, has done a lot with internet services for youth, for seniors. And so I think would be very open to hearing about this. So that was my intent.
And for the board, Valerie Dodd is the executive director of Nextlight.
Yes.
Yeah. She's amazing.
Yeah,
Very easy to work with.
Yes.
She's amazing. Yeah.
She is really, truly
So
amazing.
that may be something that doesn't even require a memo with Christina. I could have that conversation.
Oh yeah. That was my thought. Yep.
Cool. I would like to add 2 points of feedback I got in the housing stability group. I think they were great meetings, by the way. I think they were an awesome ideas, fantastically executed. There were 2 points of feedback that are peculiar to the board. And one was maybe a request I heard that the board really is positioned to get a unique view of all the nonprofits and their activities through the application process. And so that maybe we're positioned to give advice to some of the nonprofits on what other nonprofits are doing and potential collaborations, and hey, why don't you reach out to so-and-so, they're doing something similar, and maybe just try to help make connections for them, because they're not always talking to each other very much. And then the second one was, there was some feedback that sometimes the board's questions in those hearings are a bit surprising, was the word that was used, and that maybe they don't always align with the grant applicant's proposal. And so I think that there was really a request that we be a little bit more diligent in coming into those hearings with questions about their application, because it sounds like a lot of them spend a lot of time, you know, getting ready for those hearings and try to take them seriously, and so they would like to see that we've read it and thought about it and are asking about that proposal, in addition to general questions we might have. So I promised some nonprofits I would get that feedback to the board, so
Yeah.
there we have it.
That was a good point. Yeah. Grant, thank you for mentioning that. And I think any assistance that staff can provide in terms of background on nonprofits, or just any questions that you have as you're going through grant applications, yeah, just reach out. I'm happy to provide any information. Yeah, just any questions that you have. You know, we're here to support you all as well.
I think that's it on that issue, unless somebody else has anything to add. Next item is human service funding.
So we're gonna do two things tonight. We're gonna continue the conversation about, you know, finalizing the allocation formula that we started last meeting. Caitlin has suggested that she had an idea, and we actually met and she showed it to she demonstrated, and I think it's a very interesting way to look at it, and she's gonna present that tonight. We can always go back to the other three options that I had said as well, but I want to let Caitlin show her model, which I think is very interesting. And then I know that Brenda has been reaching out to all of you all about dates, and I think are you ready to present them today?
No, I haven't come back from everybody. I'm
Okay.
meeting, I mean, they are presented, they are available as far as what dates we're looking at.
Yeah, I just think as soon as you look and respond to Brenda, because we need to start getting it out to the nonprofits too, right? Because they need to be aware of when they're coming. So before I turn it over to Caitlin to her present, she's gonna present her thing. I was telling Christina that the application closed this week on Tuesday, so 2 days ago the application closed. And just at a cursory glance, there's still things that the staff needs to look at. We have quite a bit of an increase in requests and number of programs requesting funding. So at this point, and it's very preliminary, so just want to say that it's around 2.8 million that's being requested, which is a lot more than has ever been requested, and about 69 programs. So again, we have to go back and take a look and make sure those are all aligned, but it's quite a bit of an increase. So.
Aren't you so happy that you all don't do it like we used to?
Totally.
Reading all 69 applications in one, oh my gosh. Crazy.
Wasn't that fun?
No.
We gotta read all 69.
You do, yeah, but I mean.
Yeah.
And Liberto, have we provided the amount? Did we provide that last meeting? The amount that we have, the
No.
allocated amount? No,
No,
so what we're gonna propose on Tuesday, as far as the allocation to human services, I'm gonna present that to council on Tuesday is, let me grab that amount really quick. 1 point. Let me grab that. I should have had that. 1,480,045. So 1,480,045, which represents 56% of total human services set aside. So we'll take that to council on Tuesday, and we'll get further direction.
Brenda, real quick, I looked at the dates that you sent, but I don't see times on there.
I put on the email that times we would start hearings at 5:30 p.m.
Okay.
depending on how many agencies we have in each of the different areas.
Okay,
I-
I skimmed it and I didn't see it, but that's very helpful. Thank you.
I will say that we need to be as a board prepared that we may have to have, because of the increased amount in number, we may have to have, you know, and I hate to do this to the board, but we might have to have extra days, because we might have to, if there's so many for self-sufficiency, that we might have to break it up into a couple of nights. Then be shorter nights, maybe we just, instead of doing a huge 5-hour night, we do 2.5-hour nights type of thing, but yeah, just because I was not expecting to see, I try not to look at the applications until the day that they're due. I'm always curious, but I try to be disciplined about not looking. And so when we look at this, I was like, oh my word, that's a lot. So
Yeah.
just be aware that we may have to be a little flexible.
I feel like my
Alberto, on that.
The first versus 5 hours into it.
You're right. Yeah.
I was gonna say on that point, if we can, like, I don't know what the right number is, but it feels like some of our, you know, when we go beyond 3 hours, it's too much. Like it's not fair to the agencies at the end, but also like even 3 hours without a break for us is like that's well beyond like mental capacity. I would say that when we're doing it, like if we can have a break every, like, even if it's a 5-minute break every hour, just so that like people can step away, because just, even with the not having to do very many, I just often felt like those ones later, they just get in some ways they get the short end of the stick because everyone is tired, but it, you know, breaking it up into more feels like a better way to do it so that we're not, trying to.
So yeah, I just wanted to prepare the board for that. That might be a possibility, because just the increased amount of requests is. All right, so please connect with Brenda on your own. Please connect with her we have to get these dates settled pretty quickly, because we gotta let our nonprofit partners know when they're coming in, and so we're at the beginning of September, but we want to let them know as soon as we can. All right, Caitlin, I'm gonna turn it over to you so you can show your model.
Okay, so hi everyone. I'm gonna preface this by saying, you know, Alberto mentioned that I brought some of this over, and I know there was some questions or maybe like uncertainty about this particular approach to it. And so I just wanted to start with mentioning that, like, the point here is really to help give us guidelines without compromising the human touch. So the idea is, like, when we have the hearings and when we're reading the applications, that's where like the human touch and like understanding what the agencies are doing and how it's impacting the community comes in. What we have found the last several years is that even with the best of intentions, we have to make adjustments after the fact. And often that it ends up being on a per agency basis, which is good and bad in the sense of like, we sort of bring in a human element, but at a different point in that process. And so my goal with like presenting this option, or like when I was thinking about this, was like, how do we keep it fair? How do we make it so that, like, you know, just because we know that the Boulder County Farmers Market does good work, that we don't somehow end up prioritizing them over another agency that has done really well, but maybe it doesn't have the same name recognition, for example. So I'm going to share my screen, and I tried to set this up so that it's really similar to how Alberto was presenting them before. And for some reason, hold on just a second, the screen sharing is being a little weird. So it's not it's like not showing. Oh, there we go. Okay.
There we go.
Can everybody see this sort of there?
Can you make it a little bigger?
Yeah, I have a very small screen. So let me zoom. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Is part of it like off the screen?
Yeah, but you can scroll around.
Okay, okay. So I tried to just give a sense of, so last year we did, I can't see anyone, so if people have questions, I can't see you, just so you know, but last year we did 100, 90% and 80% as like the funding levels. And we had 1.4, this number up here, this 1.450849. The idea behind a standard deviation is really to take into account the spread of scores. So for example, if, when we I went ahead and calculated it based on last year's scores. The average score was an 88. From what I looked at for the previous 2 years, this was significantly lower than prior scores. And so that was one thing that came up last year, is we actually had to adjust the score ranges because so many scores were lower than we expected. The standard deviation basically tells you how spread out from that average things are. So a really small deviation means that like everyone is clustered around that average score. Whereas if there's a big standard deviation, that means that like it's really spread out.
And I will add, Caitlin, that actually using standard deviation was one of the recommendations that came out of the first focus group that we had out of the early childhood, because of the variation in funding that people were getting. One of the executive directors, and we explained that we have different board members that come in and, the training that we do. And one of the executive directors asked if we, in our formulaic approach, considered using a standard deviation. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah. So you can see, for example, last year, this is from last year's scores. The average score, the standard deviation on the board was 6.4, which means that like 50%, something, around there, was between essentially like 45 and 57, roughly. So like a big bulk of people were in like a really small range. When you get out to this total score, most people were between like 78 and 98 as the score. So just to give you a sense, like what I did was calculate, like essentially if you're more than one standard deviation from the average, that means you're like the A student. If you think of like average gives you, a C, if you're more than one above that, you're an A student. If you get the average, you're about a C, somewhere in that range. So what I did was I took this and I said, okay, if you're one standard deviation or 1.5 standard deviations above the average, we're going to give you 100%. We know you are the excellent agencies. And then if you're right in that middle part, like if you're kind of average, we would give you 90%. And then if you're more than, in this case, I said if you were more than 1.5 standard deviations below, we weren't going to fund you at all, because that basically says that like you're significantly below even the average here. So there's something that, that's not working. Your scores suggest that you're not going to be able to deliver. So just to kind of show you what that would look like. Can you all see this? This one's a lot smaller. Would it be helpful if I make it? Do I need to zoom in more, Eliberto?
Yeah, I think it would help.
Okay. Hold on just a second.
Go to 150.
150. Let's try that. Okay. All right. Whew. All right. So what this is the actual matrix from last year.
Right.
I've hidden some of the columns. Huh?
No.
Oh, I see.
Keep going.
Okay,
good.
so this is the actual matrix from last year, and I've sorted it by highest score to lowest score. To show that what the calculation would be with this one. So in this case, you know, 2 agencies got 100%, a whole bunch of agencies got 90%, and a handful got, you know, a bunch got 80, and then 4 got 0. Just so you know, this pretty much matches up exactly with what our outcome was at the end of the process last year. You can see, can you all see this actual allocation thing? Okay, so these two, this column O is the difference between what we actually allocated in 2023 and what the allocation would be under this model. This one, these two are actually the same agency in the same focus area. So we reduced their funding to be the max for that area.
Right, I was gonna say that had nothing to do with the scores, that had to do with the fact that they hit the priority limit.
Right.
Which is why they got that.
And we split it evenly between their 2 programs because they had asked for the same amount for both programs.
Right.
So that had nothing to do with the scoring and more to do with that max. And then when we get down here, these folks, you know, these 4 were ones that were right on the edge. So last year they were in the 90% bucket because we had picked a number, and under this one, they would move down because it was outside of the standard deviation. So that seems actually kind of predictable. You can see though that like all these scores were really close. You know, 88.3, 88.2, 88, 88, 88, right? Like the difference is relatively minuscule. So it could go either way. And then the last one is under this formula, Boulder County Farmers Market would have gotten 0%. That's what they got under last year's as well, but we had extra money. And so we went back and allocated money to them because they were just below our cutoff. Any questions so far? Like, I feel like there's like a lot of numbers here, and I can leave the sharing up. I cannot see anyone still. So
Why don't you stop sharing and let's have a conversation?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Caitlin, did I hear you say that the numbers were pretty close to the formula that you guys used last year? Is that what I heard you say?
Yes. But the benefit of this particular one is that like right now, we don't know what the spread of scores will be. Whereas this would allow us essentially to be responsive to what the ultimate spread of scores are. Like right now, if we pick 10 versus 20 point spreads, we have no idea where anyone's going to fall. Whereas like if we use the standard deviation, it'll adjust based on like what we actually score them without us having to go back and revisit this.
Okay. And I guess I'm having a hard time following because I don't have that history. So I'm looking at the tables presented. Those are a little easier to read kind of, but then I'm hearing the standard deviation in your argument. And so so in English like if you had to argue why your standard deviation is better than the tables that were presented, like what would you say? Like how can you formulate everything to me in a way that I could understand it?
Yeah, the biggest thing is that those tables are just arbitrary number cutoffs. They're not informed in any way by what we are actually scoring. So this board could score, like last year was 88. The average was 88. This board could come in and score, number one, the range is different this year. The highest score is higher. But we could come in and the average score could be 110, right? And so if we choose our number cutoffs without knowing the actual scores that have been given, we end up in a position where we potentially, based on the numbers we've got, we actually don't have enough money to fund based on those ranges. Whereas when we use the standard deviation, the idea would be that we're really like, we get a better sense of what the actual scores are and what the distribution of them is.
Okay, and then to Christina's comment, in hearing the nonprofits say, like, oh my God, like we really count on these funds, but a lot of the times we're spending these funds before we know what we have. And I think one even mentioned 1 year we got 45,000, and then the next year we got 90,000. Would this standard deviation help keep that more steady and consistent?
So
year
can I
after
speak to
year?
that piece, Crystal, can I speak to that piece first? So the thing about going from 45 to 90 is, what did they apply for? We don't tell them what to apply for. So if they applied for 45 1 year and you all scored them and they got the whole amount, and you still like them the next year and they scored high and so since they get to decide what they apply for, it's more, typically what happens is they'll go down or up, because remember, we've been doing 90, 80, or 70. So they might go down 10%, or they might go up 10%, or they may not get funded at all. But that 45 to 90 jump is typically because they have asked for more, not because something that you all have done.
Yeah, well, the way she presented it made it seem like, because I think, she was pretty aware in the data and the application, like if that was a factor, but the way she had mentioned it was like, this was what she was allocated, and it was starkly different. And so maybe I can email you what that agency was and we can look at that further. But I guess
we can do it, I can talk, but yeah.
Would this allow year after year agencies to get a more balanced number if they're scoring at that top number, like some of our more stable agencies like our Center and Wild Plum and the well-known agencies? Or does this not?
Well, because it still relies on scores. I mean, it's not the standard deviation piece that I do enjoy, and when she presented to me, was the fact that, like she said, it's responsive to the scores and it's not preset. Whereas if we do it the way that I was doing it, it's here it is, set in stone the way it is now. Doesn't matter how you score it, it is what it is. Caitlin's model says we're gonna look at your scores and that's going to affect the ranges, where my model says, I don't care what you score it, this is what we said what it is gonna be, and wherever it falls, it falls. But you still have to score it, right? You all still have to score. And if, and so it's hard to tell an agency it's gonna be the exact same time every year, because Moran might have scored it this year and Martha's scoring it, and they might have different ways of looking at it and score it differently. So that's where it gets at. Like you said earlier, it's competitive, and that's the human factor, right? You're scoring it, your fellow board members are scoring it, and it's hard to, I can't tell how you're all gonna score it every time.
Can I ask a super dumb question?
Yeah.
So like on that chart with the scores, and some of them are the same, like what does it separate them by? So I'm assuming, this is just an assumption, on the chart it'd be like alphabetical. So because you chose a name like lower in the alphabet, it would cut you off?
No.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Okay.
It's all based on, no, it's all based on, it's based on the scores, it's based, where, what the chart does, it typically, we,
ones in the bottom that were like red, don't get anything?
because they didn't score high enough. And then to do with the name, they just didn't score high enough.
Okay.
Yeah, so
It's hard to
I'll share that
imagine.
again. That chart that I was showing, for example, this one, the reason it's like this, these are not alphabetical. I actually
Okay.
took
Like, wait a second.
I
Some
took
of them
all of
aren't
this
the
and I
same.
sorted it by their total score. So the reason this is just so you can see that these were the ones that were 100, they had the highest 2 scores. So they got funded at 100%. The ones, all the ones that have the same score, these 3 all have an 88. They all got funded at the same percentage of their request.
Okay. That makes more
And
sense.
then these
Yeah, it's
4
all by
down
score.
here
You get
got
like that
funded
on,
at
like,
0 because they had the
100%.
lowest scores.
Yeah, all score based.
But your formula, Caitlin, allocated all and only the funds available, is that true?
So this one allocated less, but once you actually added these back in, it actually over allocated, I believe. One thing I was showing Eliberto as well that we can do is actually, you know, again, if we get to the end and we have either over or under allocated, I've set it up with formulas to actually change, you know, detect. Okay, so right, for example, this basically looks at the score and looks at our like cutoffs and does it. But let's say we got to the end and right now, this one had, sorry if I'm flipping too fast. Right now, you know, out of 1.45 million, it's only allocated 1.412. We could actually go back over here and say, okay, well, we actually have more money. So let's say, let's fund these people at 92%. And we can actually see that that gets us closer to the total funds.
Yeah,
For
I
example.
like that system.
I like that better.
Okay, so we're not making subjective.
Exactly.
Right.
We're not making subjective things. I what I like that when she presented is like, it's across the board, it's fair, it's equal.
Yeah,
Well, now that I understand it, it sounds better.
Yeah.
And right now, like what I plugged in here, you can see, so the low score here for the 100%, you had to have at least 103. That's basically if you're above 1.5 standard deviations. We could actually say, like, if we have if we have more requests, which it sounds like we will, we could actually say, actually, in order to get 100%, you need to be above 2 standard deviations. Because we don't have enough money and we need to spread it more equally. And we really want to make sure it's like the cream of the crop that are getting 100%. And then we're going to put a whole lot more people maybe in that middle range and that sort of thing. So like essentially we can play with the numbers here without going into individual agencies.
I like that.
To try to like move the money around. It would give us an opportunity to like adjust those things without getting into sort of like, I know this agency and I like them, and therefore I would like to give them more money. So.
okay, Kim and Crystal?
Caitlin, thanks so much for doing this. This was probably a lot of work. And I think I understand it, that we're not necessarily changing the ranking. Like we're still ranking top score to bottom score. What we're really doing is determining who qualifies for the percentages. What's the range for those specific award amounts, which I think it's beautiful. I really, really like it. I think it's a good, more objective way, as you said, to determine how to allocate funds.
And yes, that is correct. The idea is not to change. We're still going to rank them. We're still going to score them in the same way. I still want folks to bring like that knowledge, those questions, like under this, is bring all of that to it. The idea is really just like, rather than just sort of like picking out numbers without knowing how that goes. Or without knowing how much money we have to like allocate and how much they've requested and all of that, we can adjust it again in a way that at least feels more fair and like sort of like across the board.
Crystal?
Yes, last question. So when I was looking at Aliberto's tables, there was like the one where like a lot of people would be kicked off, right, if they didn't meet a certain percentage or number. And then there was like the middle one, like some would get kicked off, but a lot would get funding. And then there was the other one where like everybody got a piece of the pie. And so when looking at your formula, I'm kind of on this end like spectrum of like I'd rather like I don't like the idea of everybody getting a tiny little piece of the pie, because like what good does the funding do then, right? If it's just a small bit, and I would rather give a little more to specific agencies than small to a bunch of agencies. So with my like kind of my standpoint and what feels comfortable to me, how does this standard deviation like give everybody a piece of the pie? Does it leave out a lot of people? Like what
So
are you anticipating this will do? Because I saw, like you said, the farmers market was left out. So like, is this equivalent to any of Aliberto's tables?
I think that it's very close. So it's very similar because, and this is something that maybe we can talk about, because I think to your point, right now we have that 100%, 90%, and 80%, right? Like that's like, and regardless of every single formula that we've looked at, including this one, maintains that. You know, and maybe that's not the right way to do it if we're overfunded. Like maybe that's, and to me, that is actually a slightly different question, but I think it's a really good point. It's like, okay, if you're below the average or you're sort of outside of that center, maybe we just put you in that 0 bucket and we give more to the folks that are in that average range.
So,
I don't know if that's the right way.
well, but we have never given anyone more than they have asked. The board, if so, again, we don't control how much they ask for, even though sometimes I think we should tell them what to ask for, but we don't. Right? Because this board, your predecessors have never wanted to tell the Hour Center, ask for this amount, or dental aid, ask for this amount. So we don't control that. So, you know, if somebody asks for 10,000, you know, and they score high, they're gonna get 10,000. And somebody asks for 80,000, but they don't score as high, but high enough to get 60,000, they're gonna get 60,000. But we can't control that because we as a board have never told an agency, we think you should ask for $30,000 because that's what we think your services are worth. We've always left it up to the agency. So to that point, Crystal, to your point about some getting a little bit of the pie, well, that's because they asked for that tiny sliver of the pie, right? That's what they put in, and we could argue that maybe in a few years or next year we could think about controlling that, but not the way that we've done it so far. We don't control that.
Well, and we do have like a certain amount of money that's available, and then an influx of agencies who's applying for it. So, and you know, forgive me if I'm not following here, because it's like beginning years of college that I was doing stats, and I'm like, oh man. But yeah, so all right, well, thank you.
And I think that like what you're saying too, like the last few years we've had more money than we allocated, which has been, you know, like that's a great place to be. What I would say is that like this would be one step toward like accounting for the variation across board scores and staff scores. And I think there's room in the future to think about like, if we've got more agencies asking for funding and more funding, it's like, okay, to Aliberto's point, maybe we should tell you how much to apply for or give you some like guidelines for it. Or maybe we say that like, if you ask for under a certain amount of money, like, or if you ask for over a certain amount of money, you have to be in that like top range or something like that. Like if we're going to give you a whole bunch of money, you need to like excel. Like we need to know that you're going to manage that well, because again, I've mentioned this before, is like what you need to manage, you know, $100,000 grant from the city is much different than what you need to manage a $5,000 grant. And like, we're not doing anything. We're not doing anything to like do that, to account for that. We're not saying like, oh, the more you're asking for, the more you need to like actually like, you know, meet the standards or whatever. That is something that like maybe is in a next iteration of this. I don't think we're there yet. I just don't think we're quite ready for that, but it is something that I would love to see in the future, is us thinking about like, if you're over, you know, $20,000, you gotta be able to manage that, right? Like, or something. I don't know the right way to weight that, but it is something that like I think about a lot.
Well, I think what I'm excited for, I mean, yes, I think in talking in that direction, what I'm excited for, we talked about it last month too, is how do we incorporate outcomes into the evaluation, right? We incorporate them right now by looking at what their proposed outcomes are. But then how do we, because I get the annual reports, so how do we use those so that the board can say, okay, so how do they do? And how do we incorporate that into the scores next? So I'm pretty excited for the next fund round for 2025 that we can put that in there. I think it's really some great stuff that this board is considering and thinking about.
Nice, so it sounds like staff's probably looking for a vote on what
Yeah.
application formula to apply. There's a motion or further conversation around the 3 proposed formulas.
4 proposed.
4.
There's 4.
Oh, there's 4.
Maintenance is the 4th.
Yeah, Eliberto's were essentially like, what, 7, 10,
And 20, I think,
and 20 or something,
pretty big,
yes.
or 13, something like that.
7, 5, and 10, 5, 7, and 10.
Okay.
10, 5, 7, and 10 point spreads, and then mine was more adaptive. Mine was like the 4th additional, and it was the additional option to just be adaptive to the scores. Regardless of which one we end up with here, just so you know, Eliberto, I will be more than happy to help with the spreadsheet so that we can do a little bit more, you know, in terms of calculating and to see the numbers to make things easier for you if you'd like.
I appreciate the help.
Deanna,
Given that we can have discussion after a motion, I am gonna move to adopt Caitlin's standard deviation ranking system.
And I second that.
second, any discussion or should we move to vote? All right, let's move to a vote. All in favor, raise your hand. It's like that's unanimous.
I'm excited for it. Thank you all.
Great job, Caitlin.
Yes, it was, when
Love
she presented to me at first, I was like, wow, I've never even thought of this, and this looks really responsive to scores. I think it'll,
My question is, why you didn't think about it when I was on board?
You know, she mentioned it, but we never did it.
I did think about it, Shakita. It just took me, what, 2 years to actually like wrap my brain around how we would use it. So
Well, I'm glad
Crystal, you
I'm
mentioned
glad
not
you
having
figured it
done
out.
stats since like your first year of college. I'm like,
No.
I feel like I
Yes.
was pulling the cobwebs out of my head.
I like that it kind of, at a certain point, after seeing it up there presented, it might even be a little bit of a blind
Right.
Yes.
report out.
That's what I love. At the end, it is a blind, when if we need to adjust because we have so many, then we don't even have to look at the agencies, we just look at the percentages.
Yep.
And so I really appreciated that
Yep.
we no longer have to look at the agencies, we're just looking at what the standard deviation is and how that correlates to the percentages in the allocation ranges.
That's the best part.
Yeah, I love
It's
that.
the best part,
Yeah,
really.
I'm excited. I am excited about that.
Yeah, I'm up for less work.
Well, there's 68 or 69 things, so there's still gonna be a lot of work, but just real quickly, just reiterate, please follow up with Brenda on the dates. We really gotta get that out. And then I have another announcement to make about board elections. We are recruiting right now. And our city clerk let me know that we need 2 things that we need to do that I'm not sure we've done before. This was news to me, but I think we have done it. But one, we can still have, you know, Graham and Kim do the interviews, but to recommend to the council, we need a vote of the whole board. That was made, and we need to, because I guess you're all taking tons of breaks in November.
Are we?
It sounds like it.
Well, I hope so.
So,
Budget.
so we need to get it like end of October, early November. They really want us to get it to you all pretty quickly.
Yeah, because I think, aren't we having the December, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the first week of December, yeah, because, we're going to NLC,
Yeah,
that's why. So, yeah, we'll be in Atlanta for the conference.
so we may have to call a special meeting to just vote on, well, I mean, the application is open right now. We only have 1 opening though. Well, oh wait, no, well, I think Caitlin, and Deanna, actually, we have 2 openings because Graham is termed out.
Yep.
Are you?
Yeah, he's been here. This is Graham's last year with us.
Oh, so I would have been turned out too.
You would have been, yeah, because you all started
Yeah,
together.
we
That's right.
came
Yeah,
together,
yeah, so Graham, so we actually have 2 openings because Graham is technically termed out. So if you all know anybody, you know, please, we are recruiting right now. Let them know that, you know, and they'll start in January, so they'll miss the huge amount of work that you all gonna do.
That's the turn.
But let them know that there's a huge amount of work. Don't
Yeah.
hide it from them. But yeah, that's so Caitlin and Deanna, I think you two, you need to reapply. You need to make sure that you reapply if you want to continue the board, and I really hope you do want to continue on the board.
Do you remember when the
You
application
better not go
deadline?
anywhere, Deanna. Don't go anywhere.
Do you remember when the application deadline is?
October 13th.
Okay, thank you.
Just send us dates and tell us when to be there.
And that's
Okay,
all I had.
cool. Thank you, Alberto. Any other announcements or other business?
Oh, that's right. We're still gonna talk about inclement weather for the rest, like, as we get into the winter months.
Yeah, that's what it occurred to me today as we're moving in to just snowy weather and just in general yucky winter time. I'm wondering if you all want to think about doing virtual meetings during the winter. I know that we usually have 3 or 4 people that come to in-person meetings, and didn't know if you wanted to entertain that.
I could speak to that since I'm always in the meetings. You know, I would appreciate the in-person, but I also know like Brenda's probably exhausted at the end of her day, and Aliberto, Cristina, you guys like see each other's faces all day. So I'm not totally opposed, but I am on the screen all day long. And so yeah, it's really hard on my eyes when I have to go all day at work, screen time, and then the remainder of the evening screen time. So, and I do like that person to person setup. Here I am talking from the other side of the screen though. Tonight I wasn't feeling too good, so I thought it was just better that I stay home. But so I wouldn't be opposed to staying in person, but I'm totally up for virtual. It is just a little hard on the eyes.
Caitlin?
Question is the question here to go to fully virtual, just to avoid like potentially having to like last minute change things because of weather?
That was the intent. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Just during the winter time.
I love the flexibility of being able to like come virtually. So I am okay with it, but also I'm not currently working on a computer all day. And so that doesn't but I like you're describing that, Crystal, and I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I work on the computer, like hopping on another meeting at the end of the day feels very
Just thought we would mention it and wondered what you all thought.
And we can discuss this in our October meeting too.
Yeah.
So
And what we could also do is just have that as a plan B, you know, if the weather just gets really bad to send that out as an option and just commit to doing that earlier in the day if it looks like the weather is getting bad as well. We just don't want, to have people out on the road if it gets bad in the evening. You know, so if the school district closes or something like that, we could plan on doing something like that. So just thought we would mention it.
Brenda's like, come on,
Say closing.
Oh, what was that?
I said, not St. Verlaine, they don't close.
Right, right. More likely the county would close, right? Yeah.
I know my poor kids were like, wait, we're never gonna have a real snow day again.
I know.
I have to do virtual school. Like that was like, they're saying that in September. And I was like, oh.
Poor
Yeah.
kids, I know. They no more snow days, right?
All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I motion. Oh,
Yeah, seconds on favor.
Yeah.
All right, well, good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Kita.